We're on.
We're on. Hello.
Hey.
Don, I feel a little bit misguided. I thought there was going to be like 30 or 40 people here.
1,000, 34,000.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. You dropped a decimal point.
Okay. There's going to be a little kumbaya moment, a little Q&A.
And it's like 90 minutes, so you've got content for all that, right?
It's as though I have content for that.
Now, thus the unplugged portion.
Yeah, exactly. This is about, Don says, Jeffrey, I think this is the most unprepared I've ever seen you. And it's like, well, yeah, that's true. I've had like, I think this is the 6th or 7th talk. And, but here's the deal, you know, if you how many people have not attended a PowerShell Unplugged? Okay, so quite a few of you. So set expectations. It is unplugged. No, seriously, it is an unplugged session, and that literally means that we don't really have a clear flow. We have sort of a gestalt, and you know, I made a few notes, but I did not make 90. Was 90? No, 73 minutes worth of content. So we get up here, and the whole point, you will see errors. You will see misspelled things. You will see us looking at an error message saying, what the heck is that? And we'll like struggle. And here's what it's really meant to convey, right? Honestly, this is sort of what it was meant to convey. A lot of people will look at PowerShell and they'll feel like intimidated, like, you know, I'm not worthy, I'm not smart enough, etc. And what I wanted to be clear was to get up here and have the inventor of PowerShell, a Microsoft technical fellow, turns out that's a bit of a big deal, get up there and just make screw up after screw up to make you feel comfortable, to realize that that's part of the deal. And also to convey the sense of fun and exploration that is at the heart of PowerShell. Truly, that is the heart of PowerShell, is to be able to go explore and have fun and to try this and try that, and that there are a few key lessons for learning and exploring PowerShell. And if you get those key things right, everything goes smoothly. And if you don't, if you try and memorize, anybody tried to memorize all the commandlets and switches? Good, you all passed the first IQ test. There will be a few more, but that was the first one. Don't try and memorize. Like, and I've got the attention span of a cat with a laser pointer, and and the memory, like I have a hard time remembering my kids' names, right? That's why it's son, you know, turn up the TV. So PowerShell was built for like weak-minded people like myself, and so you'll benefit from that as well.
And the general theme today is just some of our favorite things about PowerShell, things that maybe you've seen or you haven't seen, didn't realize they were there. Some of the things we see people doing that we don't like, that we wish they would do differently. So call that best practices if you want to.
Yeah, and Don and I have different views of that. We were comparing notes at first. It says, tell everyone they don't have to do that. I was like, no, everyone has to do that. So
the last thing, though, and this is kind of new, we've not done this in an Unplugged before, is we're going to try and drag your attention to some of the community things that have been happening, some of the projects that you really should be paying attention to, like you really should be as part of your core tool set. Because as PowerShell hit kind of version 4 and moved into version 5, and as it moved on to Linux and Mac, this like groundswell of support started happening, and people started looking at it and going, you know, there's bits about this that I need to do my job that it doesn't do very well. And instead of just complaining about it, they fixed it. They did it. And so there's a lot of stuff out there that really solves a lot of really core problems. And so we'll bring a couple of those up to make sure that you know about them. You can go home and research them, explore them, learn how to use those, but you know, just start to get a feel for what is in there beyond the box.
Yeah, and indeed, that is the theme of this year's PowerShell Unplugged, and it is community. You know, PowerShell is a great tool. Microsoft provides some pretty good commandlets, but it's where the real action is happening is in the community. The community are taking these base building blocks and starting to say, hey, what about this? What about that? What about that? And they're starting to build fantastic projects. And this, to me, is really the kind of sign of success, where the center point of innovation of the PowerShell community transitions from Microsoft into the community. That is a revolutionary point. And it's happening a couple different places. Of course, some of the projects that we're going to show you here, but then also with PowerShell itself. Because if you're not up on current events, PowerShell is now open source. So you can participate in that. You can read the code. When you get a crappy error message, you can search the source code for that error message and then look at the code and say, oh, that's what it's supposed to be. By the way, if you do that, please do a pull request for a better error message. You can make the product better. You can add functional components.
I want to start, but while I do that, why don't you get into the repo so you can just kind of give people a little look. Here's what the repo looks like. If you wanted to find the source code for your command.
Actually, you know, it might be great. This might be a great time to bring Joey in.
Well, let me do this, and then he can hook up.
Yeah, screw Joey.
He's got to switch. He's got to switch buttons in here somewhere.
Okay. No, well, he's going to use my computer, but
okay.
You do that, and Joey, come on up here.
So whenever I write a function, and this is just meant to be a really simple one that fits on the screen well, one of the things I like to start with, or at the very least end with, is help. How many of you have written a function that has comment-based help? Yeah. I love comment-based help. I love the idea that you can document in your code in a way that also documents it for someone running your code. I love it. However, that is literally the only thing I love about it, because everything else that's cool about the PowerShell help system doesn't work with comment-based help. You can't do updated help, right? If I want to update my help, if I find an error, I have to update my code. I have to redeploy my code. That's kind of a bigger deal. I can't provide comment-based help in multiple languages unless I make multiple copies of my code, which is a terrible idea. So there's a bunch of things that aren't cool about it. And the PowerShell team actually started to run into some of these same problems when they decided, look, we want to take our documentation and make that open source as well. Well, how many of you use GitHub? All right, so what's the language all GitHub documentation is written in? Markdown. It's easy, it's easily human readable, like way better than XML. Well, speaking of XML, the real PowerShell help, like what you get from Microsoft, is in these XML files that's in this abominable format called Microsoft Assistance Markup Language that you cannot make head or tails of, right? So getting to that is really, really hard. So there's a project called Platypus, and it's in the PowerShell gallery. It's open source.
Why is it called Platypus?
I don't know why it's called Platypus. I feel that you must know.
I'm not sure that my mic is on.
Can we turn Joey's mic on?
Make Joey loud.
Hello, hello, hello. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I am the one responsible for that maybe awful name that I'm glad that Dawn pronounced correctly. The goal was that
do people do platypus?
Well, do you know how MAML gets pronounced?
Mammal.
Mammal.
Yeah.
Platypus is a really, really ugly abomination of the mammal.
I do not want to tell that story again.
So platypus, we dropped the U out. It's platypus, but yeah, that was the.
I did not know that.
That's the backstory.
Well, we should introduce Joey.
Oh,
so
yeah.
If you're in the community, you should know Joey.
Hi, everyone. I'm Joey Aiello. You can find me usually on GitHub or Twitter, but I'm the PM for PowerShell, and I'm really, really passionate about all the community and open source stuff that Don and Jeffrey are talking about today. So hopefully going to get to show some of you a little bit of that in a few minutes, but for now, Platypus.
So I've got my code here. It's in a script module called sample module, so I'm just going to import that into the space real quick. Import module, sample module. That's in there, and the Platypus module is installed on my machine. I just pulled it out of the PowerShell gallery right now and installed it. You'll notice there's not really a bunch of commands. The first thing I want to do is I want to get like a template of the markdown. Like I'm not an expert in Markdown, it's not that hard, but there are some sections that PowerShell needs, right? It needs like the description, and it needs sections for each of your parameters, and Platypus will make it for you. So I can do
and you have to spell synopsis right. I never spell synopsis right.
I'm going to do a new Markdown help for module, sample module, and I'll stick it in the current folder. So what it did is it went through every single function in the module. I only had one, but it would go through them all. And it looked at them. It actually said, OK, what's the name? What parameters does it have? And if we just pull this up in cheap old Notepad, you can, oh, that might be a little small for you. Let's make it huge. I don't know why that's hard. There we go. So it's gone ahead and created a kind of a template. Like you start right here with what the name of it is, and then there's sections for synopsis, and it tells you where you have to fill it in. And it's actually already figured out what the basic syntax is, although I could certainly expand this a bit if I wanted to add some detail to it. I fill in the description, I provide some examples, parameters. Like it just lays out everything that needs to go there. You can edit this. You can check this in as part of your source code, and should check this in as part of your source code. If you're using something like Git or GitHub or anything else that is used to Markdown, it's great. How many of you use VS Code to edit your scripts? Every one of you should raise your hands. Everyone should be using VS Code. Because VS Code has some great Markdown editor plugins too, so you can do everything all in one spot. Once you've done that, all you have to do is run this other command, new external help, pass it that Markdown, and it'll munge it into an XML file. Here's another cool thing I found out about Markdown. How many of you have used machine translation? Like feed a file to Google and see what comes out in a different language?
Oh, yeah.
Markdown works pretty well for that. Like, it turns out it's a good idea to have a native speaker double check your reading, like to make sure the machine didn't go wacky and say something rude. But it's a great way to get most of the way there, and then someone can edit it much more quickly than manually translating it. So it's a really easy thing to do. And if you ever go update your documentation, your Markdown, there's an update Markdown help. That'll just go recreate that XML file for you. And finally, the other cool thing it'll do, new external help cab. Ooh. So PowerShell's help system is designed so that you can run update help. And if your module manifest indicates a URL where help files can be found, running update help will go to that URL, grab the cab, bring it down, and install the updated help without you having to change your code. So your code and your help file are separate, and this will help you manage the, so you get to become a first-class citizen of the PowerShell help ecosystem, not just the limited version that comment-based help gives you, but you don't have to have any skills greater than what you had to have for comment-based help. So this is definitely something to start working into your processes.
That's very cool.
And this is actually how we run updatable help now. If you go out to GitHub at our PowerShell docs repository, we run Platypus in a continuous integration deployment system that is always, if someone makes a check into the Markdown, we update the cabs, those get published up to the internet, and you run update help and get the changes.
Were you going to show the help? Or that's it?
I could show that, yeah.
Oh, I meant him.
No, he can't. No, I don't have this one rigged up with all the right manifest stuff yet.
Oh. Okay, we're lowering the bar here, huh? Okay, Joey. Let's see if we can up the bar a little here. Joey.
So like I said, I'm really, really passionate about community open source. And so, one of the things that we were able to do after I joined the team with the help of some really, really awesome folks on our team that really understood the core principles of open source and why we wanted to do this, we were able to not just pull the DSC resource kit, which I think was the first thing we put out in open source,
yes.
And the PowerShell documentation, which shortly followed as Platypus sort of got off the ground, but actually now all of PowerShell. And pretty much everything we do, the first thing we ask ourselves now is like, can we open source this? Can we open source this now? It's not even made yet. Can we just make the repo and put it out in the public? And that's fun for us because you guys get to be a lot more involved in the development process. For instance, let's pop into the PowerShell repository right here. So this is all of the PowerShell code. We took this out of Windows, we put it onto GitHub, we figured out how to do all the crazy stuff to make it build without the Windows source code.
And that was really, 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 really hard. I got to take hats off to the team. They did an incredible amount of work to enable the PowerShell community to contribute, and it was all behind the scenes. So there's tons of work to make this happen.
It's you would be surprised. You guys don't necessarily care about all the nitty-gritty that it took, but yeah, it was not a super easy thing. But basically, when you come into a new GitHub repository, for those of you that haven't used GitHub before, the very first thing you should do is scroll down to the README. And the README is going to get you to start sort of understanding the structure of the repository, the different pieces of documentation, how you're going to download the bits and use them, how you might contribute back to the repository. And so as you scroll down here, we've got some getting started documentation for PowerShell. We've got all the platforms that we now support. PowerShell 6 is shipping on Mac and Linux. We've got Docker images, app images, so on and so forth. And then as you get down, there's usually some stuff about building the code and likely contributing to the code. And so here, developing and contributing, in the README, we've got a link to a contribution guide. And this guy is almost always going to be located in this .github folder. So if you don't see us link to the contribution guide in the README, first of all, that's a mistake, and you should put a pull request against the README. But if you just pop into the GitHub folder, you can usually find this contributing.md. And in here, we give you not just an intro to how our repository works, but actually to Git and GitHub, because we know a lot of people that are know and love PowerShell are still somewhat new to GitHub. We want to make sure that you guys have all the resources you need in one quick, easy place to start contributing. And as you come down here, you'll see, okay, there's a quick start checklist. You got to sign a CLA to make sure you're good with all of our legal stuff. And then we've got all these different ways that you can contribute, right? So right off the bat, you can file an issue, right? That's really easy. A lot of you, I'm sure, have filed user voice requests in the past, or even on Microsoft Connect in the past. What's great here with the issues is that in the past, as PMs, we would sort of have to look at the user voice, and we still do, look at the user voice or look at the Connect, and sort of migrate what we thought were really good bugs or really good feature requests over to the actual work tracking system. What happens here with GitHub is you file an issue, and that's where all the work gets tracked. So our engineers every single day are pulling out of this issue tracker to decide what they're going to work on. And when you file a bug, the very first person to see that bug is probably going to be the engineer that works on that piece of code. And so the feedback loop between us and you guys has gotten tight enough to the point that we're often fixing some of these low-hanging fruit bugs within 24 hours or less.
Yeah. So this is the functional equivalent of having converted one of those restaurants where the kitchen's in the back to an open kitchen where you can sit there and watch them doing the cooking, right? You see all that. You see the orders coming in. You see people working on it. If they drop your hamburger on the floor and then put it on the plate, you can say, hey, wait a second. It's all completely transparent.
How many of you, and a serious show of hands, how many of you have never been on GitHub? That's a relatively small number. How many of you have never filed an issue? Learn to.
No, they're happy.
Yeah, well, there are no issues. I see.
You guys live a pretty good life.
That's really optimistic. So, I mean,
and by the way, just to be clear, you might be thinking, oh, well, I don't want to bother the PowerShell team, or they've done such a good thing, I don't want to complain. We're Microsoft. We embrace the red. We serve you. Let me be clear. We serve you. If you're having problems, I am passionate about hearing about those problems so we can address them. So never hesitate to file an issue.
Yeah, and get comfortable with GitHub. It's a place that if you're going to continue in your career as you have been, more things are going to be there. That's where you're going to be spending more of your time. So take that as kind of an ongoing job skill.
Yeah, definitely. All of those things are true. So I don't know. Do you want me to keep going down the list here? Or?
Yeah. Well, I would say if I'm a systems admin and I think there's a bug or I don't understand an error message in invoke command. Right. Where do I find it?
So really easy way. Jeffrey and I were just talking about this earlier today. One of the easiest things that you can contribute into the code are error message fixes. So we are pretty well aware that we've got a long list of error messages that are not very good. They don't.
Or they can be improved.
They could be improved.
Even sometimes improvement is just add a carriage return here for better readability.
So if you, you've got an error message, let's just pop open PowerShell real quick, and I'll just type some gobbledygook. And maybe right here, as Jeffrey was saying, a carriage return would go really well right at that spot, right? So all I'm going to do is just take this string, and I'm just going to search for it in this repository. And you will see right here, we've got the discovery exceptions. There's also command line parser strings. It looks like this one matches more what we're going for. But literally all you have to do to edit this file, you've got a string that you don't like, right?
Oh, you're going to do it?
Spelling of the, what's that?
Do it.
You want me to do it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm not.
Let's do it. Let's improve PowerShell here. You guys are improving PowerShell.
So
or you can all play along.
We've got Jeffrey's
GitHub.
password.
You can all do this.
Right here. We can just two-factor authentication. You don't sync your text messages with Cortana to your computer?
That is literally a public service announcement for two-factor
authentication. Use two-factor authentication.
Who'd you think I was, Rusinovich?
So here we are. So this is actually landed me. This is one potential gotcha here, and I'm not actually sure how we landed right here, but it's saying that you must be on a branch to make or propose changes to this file. So all we're going to have to do, whenever you're making a change to anything in PowerShell, make sure to make a pull request or an edit against the master branch. This is where all things go in. So if we make an edit to this file right here, Jeffrey has permissions because he's, oh no, he does not, because it is a protected branch, so everything is great. Okay, so we're just gonna go down here, we're gonna look for that, oh, nope. What was the error message here? Or if a path was included, we'll look for that. Or if a path was included. All right, right there. So we think maybe this would be better with a carriage return, so we're gonna put a carriage return in right there.
I'm like legitimately nervous that this is happening live.
This is fantastic. Well, I'm serious, you can all play along. You can open up GitHub and do this now yourself. Like we could, honestly.
It'll be 89 PRs in 5 minutes.
Look at the number of people in this room. We could fix PowerShell error messages, us, here, this hour. Seriously, you up for it?
No, we should do that as a session one year.
We should. That would be great. Just set up a big lab, like fix your most horrible error message. And
Joey can sit there and accept.
And then we can build in the background, and then when you're done, here's your version of PowerShell. Thank you very much. We should do that, Anil. Yeah, you guys, would that be fun? Yeah. Because, you know, it's one thing to watch Joey do this, and I've asked Joey, hey, after this, maybe go do a Channel 9 to help people, because you'll see this and it's cool, but then you'll forget. So maybe we should do it as a lab. That would be awesome.
So this is really awesome because we didn't really have to download any tools. We didn't have to really run the local tests on our machine. Yeah. So we just said, I have a good description here, add a command return, or carriage return to the command not found exception error string. Please do use good titles. I'm not providing as much detail as I probably should in this pull request description, but for the sake of brevity, this is going to happen right here automatically. So none of you have any kind of permissions to overwrite anything in the master branch. It's just going to create a new branch, and it's going to create a pull request into that branch. So this is also going to give us an exception, or excuse me, a template, and it's going to ask us, make sure that you've signed this license agreement, all these sorts of things. But we're basically just going to hit create pull request.
And that's you asking the PowerShell team to pull your change into the main line and make it part of PowerShell.
That's it. That's a pull request. At this point, you should keep an eye on it. You may get some questions from the PowerShell team asking you, to make a change here or there if something isn't up to a certain standard. We try to be pretty nice. If people aren't being nice, you definitely let me know. Slide into the DMs on Twitter and give me a ping. But in any case, this is going to kick off a bunch of tests. In AppVeyor and on Travis CI, which are basically just test platforms doing everything automated on Windows, Mac, Linux, all that stuff. So we need these to be all green before it can be merged. But at that point, as long as the PowerShell team member has given us the go-ahead, then they can hit that merge PR button and we're good to go.
So I do really encourage you to do this and to do it with error messages, because that's the lowest bar. It's kind of hard to screw up an error message, and it's kind of hard not to improve them. Okay, so, and then and having done that, you'll have broken the seal. And then you'll say, hey, you know what? What about this? Like my favorite thing. So here's really how things happen, right? So at Microsoft, you got to understand, we're developing for Windows. Okay, we're developing for Windows. So whenever we'd have we should do this or we do this, it's like, hey, remember, this is going to go out to 1 billion users, and literally, and it's going to be have to be supported for 10 to 20 years. So is that really the right thing to do? And so we'd have conversations. I forget which one it was, but like, I think it was get credentialed. Get credentialed, you can say -message, but you can't say -title. And so I would say, hey, we got to add this. And people are like, really? I was like, yeah. I was like, well, prove it. What's the user case? What's this? And what's the scenario? What's the scenario? Oh, good Lord. And so you have this conversation, long conversation. I'm not making this up. This is not hypothetical. This is a real thing that happened many times on this one thing. So finally, okay, fine. Get your dash title is a legitimate user case. Now, which things do you want to not deliver in order to add that? Because we got to have all these tests and we have to do all this. And of course, it was always below the cut line, right? It's just like frustration you can't believe. So then we open source, and like 2 weeks later, there's this pull request from the community, get credential dash title now supported. It's like, oh, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So if you are in the room, please, and you did that, please come up. I want to thank you. I'm going to give you a hug. Okay, great, Joey. We'll have you come back on to show that other demo.
Yeah, thank you.
Give it a hip for Joey. Hey, if you don't mind, I'm kind of getting itchy to write some code.
No, type, yeah.
Okay, great. So
type, you're good at typing.
Yeah, I'm not bad at typing. All right, so hey, I wanted to talk. Let me tell you about a concrete problem that I'm dealing with, and then sort of how I addressed it, and it'll teach you a bit about PowerShell. One of the goals here is to teach you some of the things you don't know. By the way, so let's step back a second. Two thoughts. One is you probably have heard that PowerShell 5.1, we're sort of done with that line of development, and now most of our focus is on PowerShell version 6. This should not concern you at all. Honestly, it should not. PowerShell version 5.1, I am absolutely confident is going to meet everyone's needs for the next 20 years. And just to be clear, we're customer driven. So if that's not true, you talk to us, we'll respond. But I'm very confident of this. And honestly, most people are not aware of literally half the capabilities that we shipped in PowerShell version 1. And hopefully you'll see some of that here. But then, and we've had 4 versions since then, so it's really quite capable. But most of our focus now is on version 6, which is the open source cross-platform version. Now, that's one thought. Second thought, completely separately, I'm now very focused these days on something called Azure Stack. You might have heard of that a little bit this month, right? And so here's the thing you should be aware about Azure Stack. You might say, hey, this PowerShell thing, is it actually any good? Do people actually use it? And the answer is Azure Stack is delivered and deployed and configured via over, like, what was the number? It's like over 250,000 lines of PowerShell code in Azure Stack, right? Not the best PowerShell code, but lots of it, okay? And anyway, so one of the challenges, I don't know if you've ever seen one of these Azure Stack architecture diagrams, which I show up just to highlight how complex it is and how many moving parts there are. And then I have this big slide that says, hey, it's internal. Don't pay any attention to it. But the point is that to manage something as complex as a cloud, there are lots of parts and there are lots of moving parts. And so we're using PowerShell to do this. And so in order to perform any operation, you need to talk to this person and that one and then that one and that one and that one. And so we're using invoke command all over the place. But it's not invoke command get process. It's invoke command big honkin' script. Okay? And in that environment, we have so many of these things. Sometimes we found that diagnosing and finding out when something went wrong, like I wrote the script wrong or something went wrong with the environment, was hard. And so I said, oh, no problem. What I'm going to do is I'm going to write you a proxy for invoke command. So you're not going to change any of your code, but you're going to dot source in my script, and when you call invoke command, it's going to call my version, and my version is going to rewrite things and create a dump file, a debug file. So let's kind of highlight things. So step number 1, again, you can read this in the back, yes? Ish? Yeah, okay, good. Okay, let's go this way. So first, let's get some basics. Okay? So get process. Happy days. Now what was that, get process? Well, get process was a commandlet, right? Well, actually, it's a token. A token gets given to PowerShell. PowerShell binds that token to something and then runs it, okay? So now let's define a function here called getProcess and see what happens. And that process, getProcess, only does one thing. It returns nope. So now, when I run the same thing, getProcess star SS, it returns nope. Okay, so exactly the same thing had two behaviors. And why is that? And, by the way, are you familiar with this? If you say getProcess, get command getProcess, it shows you one thing. If you say -all, it shows you, any guesses? All, okay? Now, here's the distinction. If you just do get command, it shows you the one that it will resolve to, and it resolved to a function. But when I said getProcess-all, it showed me all the resolutions of that token, and you'll see that there are two. And so what this is telling you is that commandlets, or functions, get resolved first before commandlets. Functions take priorities over commandlets, okay? So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to have an alias, and I'm going to define an alias to be getService. So now when I say getProcess, okay, it shows me all the processes that have star SS. So how's that work? Again, get command-all, and it's showing me these in resolution order. So it's showing me that getProcess is an alias. That's the first thing that's resolved. Or I could have done this function, or I could have done the commandlet. Okay?
This, by the way, is a wonderful way to screw with people. Like if you can sneak to your coworker's machine because he didn't lock it and you get into his profile and you do this stuff, you can have a fantastic time.
Never let Don near your machine, okay? Just, you want to get a pen, write that down. See Don in the room, big red light, lock everything, okay? Okay, so now, in fact, getProcess, here what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the alias to this hardwired thing, okay? So I don't know if people realize this, but getProcess is actually not the name of the commandlet. The actual name of the commandlet is this thing. This is a module qualified name. How many people are familiar with module qualified names? Oh, pretty good, pretty good. Not by far 50%. This has been in there since PowerShell version 1. So again, #1 feature. There's one feature that has been in PowerShell version 1 that people didn't know about, these fully qualified names. So this is why there's this, you know, actually you and I disagree. There's this thing about never use aliases in scripts, and I'm actually not on that page. And one of the justifications people have for never use aliases is well, it could be a different thing. And so if you want it to be, you know, for security reasons, you want to give the commandlet name.
Oh, I've never seen it as a security thing. It's just a readability thing for me.
Oh, okay.
That's all.
Oh, okay.
I mean, if you have good alias names, but the main use case for aliases is for people like you who can only type 3 characters before you give up.
That's true. That's true.
Literally, the first 2 years we did this session, it's all ICK. I'm like, no one knows what that means.
Yeah.
You can't.
It's true. And then we added tab completion, happy days.
Yep.
Anyway, so if you want it to be ultra secure, this is the command you put in. In fact, actually, you can do that. Let's make sure you see this.
Because the idea is if you run the command with its fully qualified name, you know exactly which you're running. You're not running some function, you're not running some alias, you know exactly what it is you're running. It makes things harder to read, so it's not a usual practice, but it's important to understand that it's possible to hijack a command and take it away from you, and this is how you would look up and see if that's being done and how you would get to the original command that you wanted.
Okay, so great. So now what I've done is, anybody know the technical term for this? Screwed up my environment. Okay, I've screwed up my environment because I have this alias getProcess. I use getProcess all the time. And I have getFunction, or the getProcess as a function. So how do I unscrew up my, by the way, we always have this discussion about adding new verbs. And there's this one verb I keep wanting to add. Its alias would be unscrew up, but there's another term for it. And I just think that would be a great verb. Unaff my environment. Anyway, okay. So, and it turns out that the Microsoft corporate people are pretty persnickety about that sort of thing. I don't understand why. But if you did a pull request, okay, no. Okay, and so now I'm going to go into a little bit of weirdness stuff. Okay, so now I want to unf my environment. How do I get rid of that alias? Anybody know, right? So you can alias was alias to new alias. How do you what? Drive, there you go, very good. So there are these things called drives. Get, clear, get, PS drive. Oh, by the way, so here's the drives. Did you guys know get is completely optional? Did you know that? For any noun that you have, get's optional. You can just say PS drive. Yeah. Ooh. Right? Process. No, because I screwed it up now. Needing the unf verb. Service. Anyway, so you just don't need to do that. Anyway, so PS drive. And notice that there's an alias here. So there's an alias drive. And so what I can do is I can dir alias. And I see all my aliases. And somewhere in there should be a get process. And because it's a drive, what I can do is I can say remove item alias get process. And then when I say get command process dash all, it's gone, yay. But also notice there was, PS, remember I mentioned making mistakes? God damn. There's a function drive. So you notice there's no remove alias and there's no remove function. But what you can do is you can do dir function. And there it is, get process. So you can say remove item function get process. Bonk. And now when I do it again, I'm back and it works. I have unf'd my environment. Now, why did I say all that? One was to highlight a number of things, but then also to reemphasize this point. So why don't we have remove alias? Anybody know the story here? So at some point we said, hey, we should have remove alias. And somebody said, well, you realize we're going to ship this to 1 billion people, and we're going to have to support this for 20 years. Do we really need to have remove alias? And I was like, yes. And it's like, oh, well, there's another way to do it. And because there's this other way to do it, remove item, we decided not to write those code. So any of you who writes a remove alias function, which can just call remove item, I would give you a big hug. Please do that pull request. There's a long tail of these things that happen because of that. And so anyway, and that's why it is that way.
That's why it's open source now, too.
That's why it's open source. Okay, so now what I said was invoke command. I want a better way to do invoke command. How are we doing on time? I should shut up. No, let me go a little bit longer. So there's this thing called the gallery, right? Everybody seen the gallery? Oh, here, no, that's it. The gallery. So here is our gallery. And I have published something in this gallery. It had something to do with proxies, proxy, something, search. Hello? No, oh God. What, really? What did I call that thing? Oh, I called it metaprogramming. Meta.
That's just like proxy without the X, really.
There's a okay.
I don't want to get older.
There's a module called metaprogramming, okay? Anyway, so you can find this thing. You can say find metastar, and you can install it. Okay, well, obviously it's going to take a second here. And then you can install it, right, verbose and fuzz. So now what I'm going to do is when you do that, I'm going to import this thing, having installed it. Oh, really? Oh, what? I don't have it? Oh, okay, well, let's see if it actually works. We're going to do it for real. Using the amazing PowerShell and the amazing gallery, I didn't have that on my system, and now I do. Look at that. So I've got this new proxy command. So using another command I downloaded earlier, show command. No, anyway, so this is it. You give a name, and you can add parameters, and you can add command types, and you can remove parameters. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to modify this thing. I'm going to say new proxy command, and the command I want to proxy is invoke command, and I want to add a parameter on error. Okay? So we type that, and what did I get? I got text. Oh, it looks like a function, but it came out as text, right? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to send it to the clipboard. Happy days. Now it's in the clipboard, and I can paste it. And now what I can do is I can save that, save as.
So while he saves that, let's just do a quick recap. The idea is he's gone and asked PowerShell to create a version of invoke command that is just calling the original invoke command inside of itself, but it's broken out all the parameters. So you can add new ones, you can take away ones that are there. And because this is a function, if you load it in, what's it going to do to the original invoke command? It's going to it'll resolve first, and so this new version will run instead of. So you can add all your own functionality to it, you can do all sorts of fun stuff, but you don't have to do any of the hard part. The original invoke command is still there doing the real work, you're just adding some bits to it.
Okay, so here what I did was I did a show object, and for invoke command, I pointed it to my new version, and notice I don't see on error. Oh, well, I see it here, but I don't see it other places. So these things, each one of these tabs is something called a parameter set. And so, in fact, when they look at this code, you'll realize down here that it's only in, where the heck is that thing? Pretty big command.
Yeah.
Oh, look, so there's no parameter sets. So I need to add it to each one of the parameter sets. So how do I do that? And the answer is PowerShell, the amazing PowerShell. So the first thing I do is I get command for the command invoke command. Say that 3 times quickly. And then I'm going to show object for this thing. Oh, I don't have show object. Really? Really? Okay. Well, anyway, $C.parameter sets shows you all the parameter sets. And it turns out the first one has something called name. Okay, so now what I can do, by the way, so everybody know in PowerShell version 4, we fixed this problem where sometimes sometimes you have an array and sometimes you have a singleton, and it was a big mess and there was a big seam, and then we fixed that. So notice here, I specify one thing and I get the name. If I don't specify that I want one, this dot acts as an array operator, and so it'll get them from all of them. Yay, wonderful. Anyway, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and get them all and get those names. And then what I did is I piped it to a script block that just did string $underbar. But if you remember, look here, this is what a parameter specifying a parameter set name is. So what we can do, and notice this command, certificate thumbprint, exists in 2 parameter sets. So the point is parameters can exist in multiple parameter sets. Here I want my commandlet to exist in all the parameter sets. So what I'm going to do is I take that string parameter set name equals, and I substitute, what did I just do? I substitute it here. And look, I get that text. That doesn't help me. So I send it to the clipboard. And now, I'll take it and paste here. Voila, and save it. And then, hopefully, if I've done this right, when I do this again, you'll see on error, and here, down here, you should see on error, there it is. So now all the parameter sets have on error. Now at this point,
you could do some code function, add some functionality to it if you wanted.
Exactly.
How many of you have ever had a PowerShell command you're like, man, I wish it just did one extra little thing? Yeah, I've written proxies for convert to HTML, so I could do better HTML reports, ones that I like better. I've written them around export and import CSV. So I would actually, because I didn't want people to have to remember to use the minus delimiter when we needed a tab delimited document, I made a proxy function called export TDF, tab delimited format, but it was just running export CSV with the minus delimiter under the hood. Like I had to do almost no work at all, and I created this brand new command that worked perfectly for a particular situation. So these proxy functions really are useful beasts. If any of you have learned PowerShell toolmaking in a month of lunches, there's a chapter on exactly these things.
Yay. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Anyway, so then what you'll do is you modify that to add those functions, etc. There's a lot of detail to that, but I wanted to switch gears here. And has everybody seen the PowerShell, the Azure Cloud Console? Yeah? No, in the demos? You didn't see that? That thing's amazing. So this is the Azure portal, right? Yay, Azure portal. And there's this amazing new button here, and that brings up a terminal window. Gotta love it, baby. You can run, but you can't hide. The PowerShell terminal is always coming to you. Except look at this. So this, where am I? Hello? You name. Oh, it's Linux. Ooh, I ran bash. But I wanted PowerShell. Dang, if only. Really? I'll bet you on Hill's job it works. So here in the PowerShell, so in the shell up here, you can choose whether you want PowerShell or bash. Okay? When you get bash, you get Linux. Okay? But from there, you can run PowerShell. Takes a while to run. But now I've got PowerShell in Linux. So let's see if I get that right. So I ran an Azure Stack, go to the portal, bring up a command shell, a terminal window in a browser. In the browser, I run Linux. In Linux, I run PowerShell. It's the Linux version of PowerShell, right? So
this is a Leonardo DiCaprio movie, I feel.
There's PS. What? Yeah, exactly. Get process, right? All that stuff. You can do it. It was AZ resource group, blah, 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 group, something. What do I do? What do I want? Tab complete, thank you. Anyway, so the point is, if we haven't heard it before, right? PowerShell, the mission for PowerShell going forward is to be the tool that your entire company can use. Okay, the entire company. In the past, you had these silos, right? And those silos were often technology silos. We had my Unix team and my Windows team, and the Unix team had Unix tools, and the Windows team had Windows tools, and they don't talk at the lunchroom together, none of that, and they certainly can't help one another. Well, we want to break that down. We want to give you a tool that you can use, your Unix people can use, your Windows people can use to manage anything, Windows or Linux. So now PowerShell, the open source version of PowerShell, can run on Windows, Linux, Mac. It can manage Windows, Linux, Mac, running in any cloud, Azure, AWS, Google, running against any hypervisor, Hyper-V, VMware, using any storage stack, any networking stack, anything. This tool, the mission of this tool is to allow your entire corporation to manage anything using a single tool, to allow you to bring your groups together, break down those silos, and work together. So here it is, baby. We're on our way. Yeah.
I want to do a quick 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's a noble mission.
How many of you are using desired state configuration at all? Anyone using the pull server functionality? So I wanted to bring this to your attention. Let me pull it up here real quick. If you hop on your favorite search engine and type PowerShell Tug, T-U-G, like tugboat, you'll find an open source project that I kind of started, but really has been completely rewritten by a fellow named Eugene Becker, who it's essentially a web server built on .NET Core, which means you can run this on IIS, or you can run it under Linux, if that's what you prefer. And it takes care of all the translating. It understands the protocol that the LCM, the client, talks to the pull server. And he's written it with a provider layer. So when you configure it, when the LCM wants to talk and it sends the request off to the pull server, your code runs. You don't need to know anything about web server programming. You don't need to know. You could just write a PowerShell script, and it gets a bunch of parameters. Okay, here's the client ID. Here's his IP address. He asked for his MOF. Your code can run. Now, there's a simple implementation included with the project that will just essentially duplicate what the native pull server does. It'll just go look for that file on disk and serve it up. But you can code whatever you want. Hey, a request just came in. It's this client. I'm going to go to the SQL Server database. I'm going to grab these 5 fragments, assemble a configuration script into Voltron, run it, generate a MOF, and ship it to the client all dynamically. And I'm going to run a bunch of logic to decide what it gets at what time. So, you're outside of a maintenance window? Yeah, no worries. Don't do anything different. You're in a maintenance window. I've got all this stuff queued up for you. Here you go. This isn't ever going to be something that anyone will give you shrink-wrapped, because every single one of you has got really slightly different needs and the way you want to run your IT infrastructure, which is why Eugene wound up building it this way. If you've got developers, they can code all this up in C#. You can do it in PowerShell. There's a Python provider if that's what you prefer. So again, it's using the tools you already know to build the things you need off of that base platform. And the reason I wanted to get it out there and make sure everyone was aware of it is because Eugene's trying to make this better. Like, you can see the number of pull requests and issues he's worked through, and the more people who are installing this and using it, the more of those things will get worked through, and it'll make it a better product for everybody in the end. So take a look at that really hard if you're using DSC with the pull server.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Great. Great. So now I want to highlight some of my favorite things. Great. So these are contributions I mentioned. Now we're open source. And members of the community, hopefully some of you are out there, have been contributing. Okay, so at this name here, contributed code that allows us to now do start process minus what if. Okay, didn't have that before. Here, okay, here's a path. And now, thanks to at power code, we can now say -leaf base to get PowerShell, or -extension to get the extension. In the past, that didn't quite work. We had parent and we had child, and then if you had the child, then you had to do your own splitting. Now there's a direct command for that. So thank you very much. The Flying Corpse.
Just a note to carefully choose your GitHub handle.
Awkward. The Flying Corpse. Okay, so what they did was invoke web request did not have a no proxy, so they added that support. And that, yay, thank you very much. Sazonov, very active guy in the community. Thank you very much. He's from Russia, I think, and so we appreciate him so much. He added expand property, right? Tab expressions. So you can do this. Dir dot, like to select object, and now expand property, and now you can do tab completion. Oh yeah, that awesome? This guy needs it. For you, baby, for you. Yeah. Thank you, community. Thank you, community. By the way, hey, the guy out there who wrote this code, this guy owes you a beer. You've made his life. He will guarantee you buy you a beer, and probably some others. This community thing's pretty darn cool. Okay, so in the past, let's see if I get this right. Am I gonna get this right? So, which version am I in? Okay, so in the past, let me show you what our JSON support used to look like. What are you snickering? Are you snickering?
No, I'm allergy.
You were snickering. Don't snicker. Okay, so maybe not the nicest looking JSON, okay? And now, in the new version, thanks to Kit Holland, we have pretty nice looking JSON, okay? Very nice looking JSON, in fact. So thank you. Pet Seral. Here's another one. Okay, so here, let's do this in this world. Remember I mentioned making mistakes?
Can I snicker now?
What?
Nothing.
What did he just say? Okay. So there you go. So here we're converting an array, and it's got an array of one thing, and so it looks funky, and some people say that's not correct. Now, it does it correctly. Okay? So I got example after example of this. There's tons. Anyway, the kind of key point here is I want to highlight this. PowerShell is getting better because of the community. And I want to thank you so much. Again, the center of gravity for an innovation for PowerShell used to be the PowerShell team, and now that's shifting to the community. It's not fully there, but it's moving in that direction, and we'll be there pretty darn shortly. Now, one of the things, let's see, did it ever work here? Did that thing work? All right, so here, because PowerShell exists in, did that actually work? Yeah, exists now on Linux, it opens us up to a new ecosystem of tools. This guy here has time to code, right? It's a web environment, browser-based, and uses Linux containers to fire up containers and sandboxes to teach people how to code, okay? So here on the right-hand side, you say, okay, so here's Python, so let's switch that. Because PowerShell is now Linux, they were able to do a very small amount of code to add this to this environment. And now everybody can use this. So now you can say get, well, let's do this, for each $P in get process. Name is -f $P.name. Okay, and then we'll run it. Ta-da, it works. And so now you're able to access, again, what I'm saying is that because PowerShell exists on Linux, now we're able to take advantage of the Linux ecosystem of tools. Oh, and I forgot, how could I forget this? Perhaps one of the most successful, or one of the things, community tools I'm most excited about, we've been showing you all event long, and that is Visual Studio Code. Okay, Visual Studio Code. So look, we're on PowerShell version 6, okay? And so what we're doing is we're open sourcing, and you can all contribute. But in reality, you don't have an opportunity to contribute to sort of the core design. You can't go back and say, hey, I think you got this syntax wrong, et cetera. It largely is what it is, and then we can improve from there. Really, the way you want to do open source community stuff is to start in the community and have the community in on the design of itself. And that's what Visual Studio Code is, or the Visual Studio Code for extensions for PowerShell. David Wilson and Keith Hamilton. Keith is one of the contributors of the code. They've been working hand in hand and developing, and they have been moving so fast. I mean, the time somebody on Twitter, like, it doesn't do this, and Dave would be like, now it does. Like, what? What just happened there? They're very active, and they're moving very quickly and listening to the community and are incredibly engaged, and they're moving at a fantastic speed. This, in my view, is sort of the gold standard of community engagement. So hats off to both of them.
If you've not used VS Code, it's not the gigantic thing that Visual Studio is. It's much more trimmed down. It is cross-platform, and the neatest thing is that these extensions are really what gives it all of its ability. It's like a very stripped down thing in and of itself. So when you add the PowerShell extension, like nearly every day when I boot it up, it'll just say, hey, I updated the PowerShell extension, hit the refresh button. You don't have to install or uninstall or reboot or anything. It just refreshes the page and the extension's there. So it's easy to stay up to date. And be really clear that VS Code is the way forward in terms of a PowerShell script editor. So if you're used to the ISE, set it aside, get VS Code on your machines. If you're using something third-party, take a look at VS Code. Like, its level of integration and the amount of clutter it puts in front of your face is a really good balance. Like, you get a lot of features with not a lot of Chrome taking up a lot of space. I've started using it as a Markdown editor. I really, really like it, so I can do all my docs there. I do almost all of my PowerShell stuff, unless I've just spun up a new VM like I did today off a fresh image. I always have VS Code there. Its debugging is so superior to any experience you've had before that once you experience debugging in VS Code, you will never go back. So if you need to convince yourself, try running through a debugging session in VS Code. That is what did it for me. That's what made me decide, okay, it's time to relearn my keyboard shortcuts because that's amazing.
Yeah, and they've just done so many great features. So here's a hash table. Did I get that right? So what's that complaint about? Hash is assigned but never used. Yeah, that's fine, great. So notice that kind of looks like crap. Format the document. Look at that. How beautiful is that?
And just do that before you paste your code into a forums where you're asking a question. Because if you have neatly formatted code, people will answer. And if you do not, then they will not.
Okay, hey Joey, come on up and show us that, that great new, which community project we're going to talk about? Plaster.
You're plastered?
Yes, he's plastered.
He's plastered, excellent.
Yeah, what's the name, what's the story behind this name, Joey?
This one I did not know. Mike again, hopefully. Mike.
Can we get a microphone for Joey? You can just speak into the chest.
Talk. There we go.
There you go.
Yeah, so Plaster is really awesome in that it allows you to essentially use a bunch of these community tools, whether they were made by us or someone else, in one sort of standardized way. It's essentially a way to build a template for what you consider a best practice module, and then to apply that template whenever you're creating any new module of any kind. So whether it's
can I motivate this?
Yeah.
So PowerShell, from the very beginning, I wanted to have a tool which had a very wide dynamic range. Something that you can like hack together something quick and easy and dirty, etc., to something very formal. And so what you've seen is, in reality, at the beginning, we were more focused in on kind of informal, lightweight things. And now we are focusing more on more formal things. Again, you'll have your choice about what you want to do. It turns out that to facilitate sharing, to be a member of the community where I'm getting stuff from you, you're getting stuff from me, et cetera, a little bit more formalism makes that all go a little bit quicker. In addition to that, it turns out that large-scale projects, like when you have 250,000 lines of PowerShell, benefits from some of this formalism as well. So this is a fantastic tool to help produce your projects in a way to make it easier to share and to help you be more production-oriented in the development of it.
Yeah, so what I've done here while Jeffrey was talking was install Plaster and then some other community tools, something called Sake, which is essentially a task-oriented framework, very similar to Yeoman, for anybody that knows that. And then I've installed Pester, make sure, I mean, we all have Pester on our machines already, but just wanted to make sure to get the latest version. And then we also got Platypus, so the help generation that we were talking about just a little while ago. So this is where having my machine actually is helpful, because it does not appear that you have Git installed. However, we can, and this is for anybody that, you know, if you don't want to install Git, don't feel super comfortable, it's not a big deal. You can just hop into a GitHub repository and download a zip of it. And the reason I'm grabbing the repository in addition to the module is because there are some awesome examples that are included in the repository that I think will eventually find their way into the released version on the gallery. But for now, we're just going to download a zip of this real quick. Hopefully, this is OK to put in. We'll just go to ctemp. And you can do this with any GitHub repository. Just clone or download, and then you're good to go. So we're just going to take all this.
Plaster Master.
Plaster Master.
Okay. Sounds like a DJ. Plaster Master.
So we've got Plaster now. So here we are. Let's see where I'm sitting. OK, we're in temp, and we're going to go to Plaster. Somebody's going to have to tell me later what he's miming on stage. So there's this awesome template. It's basically an XML file, and it says, hey, these are all the different options that the module could have when I create a new module. And based on those options, throw down some templated files based on any kind of parameters I can give you. It'll make a little more sense when you look at it just in a second here. But I'm basically just going to run invoke Plaster. And I'm going to run it against the template in this example folder. And I'm going to give it a destination path of awesome community module.
Boy, the way you want to think about this is that there's the code you write, and then there's all the stuff around that code to have your code fit into a set of tool chains, right? Hey, how do I have a license? How do I work with GitHub? How am I going to unit test, et cetera? So it's more than just the code itself. It's how does it fit into a whole continuous integration, continuous deployment environment.
Yeah, and so for every one of those questions that you might ask, this is going to pop up. And I should mention as well, we originally started the project, I believe. This was a lot of community feedback coming in saying that this is something that you guys could use. So it does exist within the PowerShell repository. But one of our community members, Keith Hill, who I'm not sure is in the room today, awesome guy, has written the vast majority of the code for this. And so he's just a direct maintainer on that project now, and he's taken it off to awesome places. So,
yeah, by the way, we all owe Keith Hill a beer. I think if we gave it to him.
Not just for plaster, for all kinds of things. Keith Hill, yeah, definitely. So I'm getting a bunch of options here. Enter the name of the module. We're going to call it Awesome Community Module. Give it a description that's required for publishing. So say this module is awesome. And this sort of stuff is going to go into the module manifest. The version number, we're not at a 1.0 yet. I know new module manifest still goes to 1.0, but this is going to go to 0.1. It's a pre-release. I'm going to put in my full name. And then I'm going to get these questions. Hey, what kind of license do you want to use? I really love the MIT license, so I'm going to go ahead and use that one. It's going to ask me to select one or more of these options. This looks a little bit better in the normal terminal emulator. The VS Code one, we're still making some improvements here. But it's going to add a git ignore file, a socket build script, pester test support, script analyzer support, which is the thing complaining about these aliases right here, right? We get these little best practices where we can fix these things in the editor. And platypus generation support. So for the sake of brevity, I'm just going to take the defaults there. And then it's going to ask if you have any editors that you want to integrate with. Visual Studio Code's the only option today, but we're doing hooking editor services up to Vim as well pretty soon. So, which I think might have been shown at the one of the demos here. But in any case, we're going to go with code. And all these files are going to get created, right? And I'm told that I have some new Sake tests or tasks that I can run, that I've created some pester tests, that I have a build task, et cetera, et cetera. This is all really well integrated with code. So I'm going to go ahead and pop open that folder in a new code window. I'm sitting in here. And I haven't done anything yet, but I already have all these files sitting over on the left. Right? And so obviously I've got a source directory. This includes the PSM1. Right? There's a little bit of boilerplate here that exports all of the verb-noun, but you're going to go ahead and dump your code in here. We've got a manifest that respects all of those things that we plugged in, right? The module version, et cetera. It's generating a new GUID as well. And then for those of you not familiar with pester, we've got some pester tests. So actually we've dropped a boilerplate test right here that makes sure that the module manifest is valid. We've got, you could potentially have some shared tests that you want across all of your modules in the community or in your enterprise environment. And so this shared test file is going to get dropped down. We've also got these Sake tasks, right? And this is the really interesting one. So these Sake is essentially just a way to build these tasks that each represent the life cycle of your project, right?
Think of it as like make using PowerShell.
Right, right. With but really to extend that as well. So you've got the make clean and the make build, but there's also a signing task and a build help task and an install task. That's make as well.
Yeah, right. So actually, it extends make to be the full life cycle of the
module.
Code. Yeah.
Yeah. And so this is auto-generated. I'm told not to modify this file at the top. But this build settings file is actually what's going to regenerate those Sake tasks every time. So if I put my source code in a different directory, or if I want the release of the module to go to a different directory at build time, I can specify that here and regenerate those tasks. Now, because I selected VS Code, I've also got these workspace-specific VS Code settings. I've also got workspace-specific VS Code tasks that tie into the Sake tasks. So I was told by Plaster, when I hit Control-P, I can just type task build, and that's just going to run the Sake build task, which is going to do all the things that I want to do before my module goes up. and it's going to throw them in the release folder. And because I use the git ignore, that folder is also being ignored by my Git client, so I don't accidentally check in the release build that maybe pulls in some credentials that are needed or pulls in some signing or something like that. What's really awesome, I think, about Plaster here is that I can run a task to publish. And what this is going to do is pop a prompt to publish to the PowerShell gallery. And it's actually going to ask me for a NuGet API key. I'm going to give this some gobbledygook because I don't actually want to publish anything. But when I hit enter here, it's actually going to encrypt using my user credentials a CLI XML file that has that API key. It's going to put it in my app data folder, and it's going to persist that. So that whenever I run a publish module, I no longer have to, or a publish task, excuse me, I no longer have to copy and paste my API key in. So Plaster just brings in all these things that just automatically take care of all this stuff for you. It's got signing as well. I'm not going to show that right now, but really you can extend it to generalize to whatever you have in your enterprise. So it's not just that we want you following these best practices in the community because it's helpful for these shared assets, but if you're in an enterprise where you have some very strict requirements around how you build your modules, how credentials are stored, what kind of licensing you should use, whether you like tabs instead of spaces. All of these things can be codified in a Plaster template, and then you can roll that out and ensure that all modules in your environment get created the same way.
Excellent. And this is really what high-end looks like. If you're wondering, okay, I hack out some scripts and I check it into GitHub or TFS or whatever, this is what PowerShell looks like when you're taking it really seriously. This is a mission-critical asset. This is how developers work when they're creating mission-critical code, and we're really no different if that's what we're doing.
Yeah, let's give it up for Joey.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Hey, you have a URL list, right?
Hold on a second. So what I want to highlight with Joey's talk was, hey, we all know we're writing scripts and that's all awesome, and sometimes we're sharing it. But as we go from that to more formal stuff that's in production that we're going to rely upon, that we're going to use to help multiple teams, brings teams together, there's a set of things. And they're all out there in the community, and it can be daunting, like which one and how do I use it, and how many things should there? Are there 3 things I should be doing or 5 things, and which is the best one, etc. The great thing about Plaster is it provides you a starting point. You use Plaster, it creates answers for all those things, and you set your expectations. Oh, I need one of these, I need one of these, I need one of these, and it guides you. Now, at any given point, your company might say, hey, instead of doing it this way, we want to do it that way. And it has the ability for you to have your own company policies enforced via these templates. But it really is a way to kind of make the transition from I'm coding for myself to I'm coding for my community. Whether my community is my team, my company, or the industry, this is a great starting point to get on that path.
And as we start to wrap up, there's some useful URLs up here from some of the stuff we've looked at, some other cool things. The time to code is up here. But I wanted to kind of close and give you a next step. Like if you're going to get involved, if you're going to do PowerShell, where should you be pointing your eyeballs? And the first is the PowerShell team blog. That's something you should definitely be watching. Not necessarily the Twitter account, simply because it's so easy for something important to get buried in your feed if you don't look at it for 30 seconds and not see it. Just check in with the team blog once a week. Grab the past couple of articles that you might have missed. That is important, like here's what's happening to our universe stuff. Pay attention to that. Jump on a website like PowerShell.org. I'm biased, I help run that one. Answer people's questions. Offer a different perspective on a question that was already answered. Maybe somebody was answering a question and they just had to fire off something really terse. Go in and say, yeah, also, and here's what that means, and break it down a little bit. Re-explaining it to someone else will reinforce it in your head. And that's also a good place to pick up news about what's happening. And if you're looking to get together and have a big community hug, consider PowerShellSummit.org. That's where the folks who are producing many of these open source projects go to share and hang out and get feedback, and the whole team shows up. We do it up in Bellevue. It is a good time, I absolutely promise.
It's fantastic.
So thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. Thanks for having me up. And enjoy the rest of your Ignite.
Hey, thanks. Have a great Ignite.